Welcome to Talk Treatises. Today, I want to start by admitting a mistake. A pretty big one, actually.
Oh, this sounds promising.
Well, when I first picked up the stack of research for today's deep dive, I looked at the title of the primary text, and I honestly thought we were going to have a nice, relaxing hour.
Just a calm chat.
Yeah, talking about mindfulness.
Yeah.
Maybe we discuss the proper water temperature for a good sencha.
Yeah.
Or the difference between Earl Grey and Darjeeling. I thought we were doing a cooking show.
And then about 5 pages in, you realize you were in way over your head.
Completely. I was expecting a manual. What I got was a manifesto. We are looking at the Book of Tea by Okakura Kakuzo. And for anyone listening who thinks this is a guide on how to brew a beverage, you really need to reset your expectations immediately. Yeah. This isn't about a drink. It's a weaponized aesthetic.
That's a great way to put it, a weaponized aesthetic.
It's a defense of the East Asian soul against Western materialism, written by a man who was watching his entire culture get swallowed whole.
It really is a fascinating text because of that tension, that friction. It bridges aesthetics, religion, and what Okakura calls the art of life. But you're right, it is not a passive text in any way.
Not at all.
It uses a simple cup of tea to explore the absolute heights of Taoism, Zenism, and the entire history of Chinese and Japanese philosophy.
And we have to place this in time. We absolutely have to. This was written in 1906.
Right at the turn of the 20th century.
And that context is so vital because if you don't understand the geopolitics of 1906, you miss the anger that's hiding just underneath all the poetry.
Exactly. This wasn't written in some calm vacuum of meditation. You have to remember, this is right after the Russo-Japanese War.
A huge moment.
A world-changing moment. Japan had just stunned the world by defeating Russia, a major European power.
Right.
It was the first time in modern history that an Asian nation had defeated a European empire in a full-scale war.
And the West was, to put it mildly, freaking out.
Completely losing its mind.
This was the peak era of the Yellow Peril propaganda. You had newspapers in Europe and America painting Asia as this rising barbarian horde that was going to destroy civilization as they knew it.
And that is precisely where Okakura enters the chat. He was a curator, a scholar, a man who straddled both worlds. He spoke fluent English.
And he wrote this book in English.
Yes, specifically for a Western audience. And he starts with this incredibly sharp, almost sarcastic critique of that Western anxiety. He doesn't talk about the Yellow Peril. He talks about the White Disaster.
I have a quote right here because it hit me so hard. He points out this devastating hypocrisy. He says, essentially, that when Japan indulged in the gentle arts of peace, when they were painting scrolls, writing haiku, perfecting the tea ceremony, the West regarded them as barbarous.
Right. They were seen as quaint, backward, maybe a little effeminate or stagnant, uncivilized.
But, he says, the moment Japan started committing wholesale slaughter on the battlefields of Manchuria, referencing that war with Russia, suddenly the West started calling them civilized.
It is such a biting observation. He is holding a mirror up to the West and saying, you didn't respect us when we were artists. You only respected us when we proved we could kill as well as you can.
Which implies what, exactly?
It implies that the West's definition of civilization is fundamentally broken. It's based on military might and industrial capacity rather than any kind of refinement of the human spirit.
So his mission in this text, and the mission of our deep dive today, is to explain what he calls the cup of humanity.
The cup of humanity.
He wants to show that the true civilization of the East lies not in its new battleships, but in this one specific Asiatic ceremonial that commands universal esteem.
He argues that the tea ceremony is a kind of universal language. It's the one place where East and West might actually be able to meet if the West can just, shut up long enough to listen.
Okay, so let's get into the thesis, because he defines this thing he calls teism, and it's not just liking tea.
Not even close. He calls it a religion of aestheticism.
And then he says something that I think is the key to the whole book. He calls it a worship of the imperfect.
That's the phrase. That's the one I want everyone to hold on to for the next hour, the worship of the imperfect.
He says it's a tender attempt to accomplish something possible in this impossible thing we know as life. Just a beautiful line.
It is. It frames the whole project as something gentle and achievable, not some grand, impossible quest for perfection.
I love how he breaks down the scope of teism. He says it is 3 things: hygiene, economics, and moral geometry. Now, hygiene makes sense. You have to wash the cups, you have to be clean. Fine. But economics, How is it economics?
Well, it's economics in the sense that it shows comfort in simplicity rather than in the complex and costly.
So it's anti-consumerist.
Deeply, it challenges the entire economic model that says more is better. Teism says enough is better. If you can find the entire universe in a simple bamboo whisk, you don't need a golden scepter. That is a profoundly economic statement.
And Merle geometry. That's a phrase that just stuck with me. What is that?
I think it means defining our sense of proportion to the universe. When you sit in a tea room, which we'll get to later, you are small. The room is mostly empty. You are forced to confront your own scale relative to the cosmos.
It puts your ego in check.
Exactly. That's geometry applied to morality. It's about finding your proper place.
He also has this great spectrum for describing people's personalities, using tea as a metaphor. He says that in Japanese parlance, if someone is insusceptible to the serio-comic interests of the personal drama.
In other words, if they have no sense of humor or poetry about life.
Right. He says they have no tea in them.
Which is a sick burn in 1906 Japan. It means you're too rigid. You're too serious. You lack the poetic flexibility to appreciate the small jokes and tragedies of life.
But then on the other hand, he critiques the untamed aesthete, the person who runs riot in emancipated emotions.
The drama queen.
Yeah, basically. He says that person has too much tea in them.
Right. You don't want to be so obsessed with art and beauty that you lose your grip on reality and become, well, useless. The goal of teism is the middle path. It's all about balance.
It's about finding that cup of humanity.
That's the center. He argues that humanity essentially meets in the teacup. The West accepted the beverage. Afternoon tea became this massive ritual in England. But Okakura argues they missed the entire point.
They took the caffeine, they took the sugar.
But they left the philosophy at the dock. They treated it as a stimulant, not a sacrament.
And to understand that sacrament, he says, we have to look at how tea evolved. Because the text breaks this down into 3 distinct schools, corresponding to 3 dynasties in China.
And this part blew my mind because I just thought tea was, tea. You put leaves in water. But he describes this progression that mirrors the evolution of the human spirit.
There really is a history of philosophy disguised as a history of a drink. Let's start with the first one, the classic school. This corresponds to the Tang dynasty in China.
The Tang dynasty. We're talking roughly the 7th to the 10th century. In this era, tea is boiled tea.
And the central figure here is a man named Lu Wu. Okakura calls him the apostle of tea.
Lu Wu is the grandfather of it all. He was a poet, and he was born in an age when Buddhism, Taoism, and Confucianism were all kind of swirling together, seeking a synthesis. And he wrote a book called The Chacking.
The Holy Scripture of Tea.
A holy scripture, not a recipe book. That's a key distinction.
So it's not like the joy of cooking.
No, this was a cosmic code. For Lu Wu, making tea was about bringing order to the chaos of the universe. The rules he set down were incredibly specific. It wasn't just boil water. He had specific instructions on the fire, the leaves, and especially the water.
I was laughing at how specific he was about water. He insisted that mountain spring water was the best.
The absolute best.
River water was, okay, but well water.
Inferior. Trash. Don't even think about it.
And the salt. In the Tang dynasty, they added salt to the water. It was more like a soup or a savory broth than what we think of as tea today.
But the visual aspect was where Lu really got obsessive. He went on and on about the color of the cup.
This was the blue glaze requirement, right?
Yes. He argued that the perfect cup must have a blue glaze. Why? Because the blue color lent an additional greenness to the beverage.
So it made the green look greener.
Exactly. If you used a white cup, he said it made the tea look pinkish and distasteful. It ruined the harmony. It was an aesthetic crime.
It's color theory as a religious rite. And the boiling process itself, he describes it with such poetry. He identifies 3 distinct stages of the boil.
The first boil, this is when the little bubbles appear on the surface, which he describes as the eyes of fishes.
Fish eyes.
Okay.
Then the second boil, the bubbles become like crystal beads rolling in a fountain. This is when you put the leaves in.
And the third boil.
That is when the billows surge wildly in the kettle. At that point, you have to stop the fire immediately or the water becomes old and the soul of the tea is lost.
The soul is lost.
The resulting drink he called a froth of liquid jade. Froth of liquid jade. It sounds incredibly intense and ritualistic. It feels very external, like you're trying to build a perfect structure to hold the universe.
That is the classic school in a nutshell. It is symbolism. They were trying to mirror the universal order in the physical world. It was about conforming to an external ideal.
But then we move to the Sung dynasty, and the whole vibe changes. This is the Romantic school.
The Sung dynasty, roughly 10th to 13th century, the method shifts to whipped tea.
Whipped tea.
This is where we see the introduction of the bamboo whisk and powdered tea leaves. This is the direct ancestor of the matcha you see in hipster coffee shops today.
But the philosophical shift is even bigger than the whisk, isn't it?
Oh, it's massive. Yeah. In the Tang dynasty, they were trying to symbolize the universe. In the Sung dynasty, they were trying to actualize it.
What's the difference?
They stopped looking for the law outside themselves and started looking for the law within. The focus turns inward.
Okakura says this is where life becomes the process, not just the deed.
Exactly. It represents the merger of Neo-Confucianism and Taoism. They were trying to find the universal in the particular. They believed that the entire cosmos could be found in the frothing of the tea in that one bowl.
You didn't need to build a giant temple anymore.
No, you just needed to whisk the tea with the right mindset. The temple was inside you, and the tea was the key to unlocking it.
And this is where the Zen connection really solidifies, right?
Crucially, yes. The Southern Zen sect formulated the ritual of drinking from a single bowl before the image of Bodhidharma. They drank it as a sacrament to aid meditation. This ritual in the Sung dynasty is the direct ancestor of the Japanese tea ceremony.
But then disaster strikes. And this is the part of history I feel like we often gloss over in the West, but for the story of tea, it's basically the apocalypse.
The Mongol invasion. In the 13th century, the Mongol tribes swept down and just devastated China. It wasn't just a political change, it was a cultural decapitation.
A decapitation. Wow.
They destroyed the Sung culture, they burned the books, they smashed the ceramics, they killed the scholars. The whole intellectual and artistic world was shattered.
And when the dust settled and the Ming dynasty eventually reestablished native rule, the thread had been broken.
The magic was gone. Okakura is actually very sad when he writes about this part. He describes the Ming dynasty tea, which is steeped tea, the tea we know today with teapots and loose leaves, as a decline.
Not an evolution, a decline.
A decline. He says tea became a delicious beverage, sure, but it lost its status as a religious ideal. It became mundane.
He describes modern China, modern to him, in 1906 as old and disenchanted.
He says, and this is a direct quote, "They have forgotten that tea is a religion. They forgot the whisk. They forgot the froth of liquid jade. They just put leaves in a pot."
But, and here's the pivot, that Sung ideal didn't die completely. It was preserved in a kind of time capsule.
Japan.
Yeah.
Because of Japan's relative isolation and because Japanese monks had traveled to China during the height of the Sung dynasty and brought the seeds and the rituals back with them.
They held on to it.
They held on to that Sung ideal of whipped tea. And while China moved on to steeping, Japan froze that moment in amber and elevated it, refined it into the full-blown tea ceremony.
So teism, as we're discussing it today, is this preserved and evolved ancient Chinese philosophy that found a sanctuary in the Japanese archipelago.
Exactly. It is a ghost of the Sung dynasty, living on and thriving in the Japanese tea room.
Okay, so to understand the metaphysics of that sanctuary, we have to look at the two pillars the text identifies, Taoism and Zenism. And I want to spend some real time here because Okakura explains these concepts in a way that is incredibly accessible, but also kind of brain-breaking.
Let's start with Taoism. Okakura calls it the art of being in the world.
He quotes Lao Tse, the founder of Taoism, who has this great line, "If people of inferior intelligence hear of the Tao, they laugh immensely. It would not be the Tao unless they laughed at it."
Which is such a brilliant defense of the absurd, right? If your deepest truth makes perfect sense to everyone immediately, it's probably not that deep. It's too surface level.
The core Taoist concept he explores is the idea that the absolute is the relative. It's about the great transition. He says the truth is in the passage, not the path. But the part that I had to read 3 times, and the part I want to break down for the listener, is the theory of the vacuum.
The vacuum. This is the heavy lifting of the book.
It's the idea that the reality of a room is not the walls, but the vacant space within them.
Think about it. When you build a house, you spend all your money on the wood, the brick, the roof, the drywall. But what are you actually living in? You don't live in the walls.
You live in the empty space between the walls.
Exactly. The emptiness is the entire point of the structure.
He uses the pitcher analogy too. The usefulness of a water pitcher isn't the clay it's made from. It's the emptiness inside where the water goes.
If the pitcher were solid clay, it would be a useless brick. Its value lies entirely in what is not there.
This just flips our normal Western thinking completely on its head. We are obsessed with substance. We want more stuff. We want to fill the room. We want to fill the silence.
And Taoism says, no, The value is in the void. The power is in the emptiness.
Why? Why is the emptiness so powerful?
Because only in the vacuum is motion possible. Only in the vacuum can you enter. So in art and in life, the Taoist principle is that you must leave a vacuum for others to enter and participate.
This applies to conversation.
Yeah.
If I talk nonstop and never take a breath, I'm leaving no vacuum for you.
And the conversation dies. It becomes a lecture. But in art, it's even more profound. Okakura argues that suggestion is more powerful than full revelation.
What does he mean by that?
Well, if an artist paints every single leaf on a tree, every single hair on a dog, they have done all the work. They have left no room for the viewer's imagination.
The viewer just becomes a passive consumer of information.
Precisely. But if the artist just paints a branch, a bit of mist, and the suggestion of a bird, the viewer's mind fills in the rest. The viewer has to participate. They become a co-creator. The art happens in the vacuum between the canvas and the mind.
He connects this to jiu-jitsu as well, which I did not expect in a book about tea.
He does, and it makes perfect sense. Jiu-jitsu is the art of the vacuum in physical combat. You don't meet force with force. That is the way of the solid, the way of the wall.
Right.
In jiu-jitsu, you create a void. You yield. You draw out the enemy's strength by non-resistance, by creating a vacuum, and then you use their own momentum to defeat them. It's all about spacing and emptiness.
So that's the Taoist foundation, the power of the empty space. Then we have Zen. How does Zen differ from or add to this?
Zen is the practical application. It's the pragmatism. The text defines Zen as the art of feeling the polar star in the southern sky.
Which is a paradox, a kokan. You can't see the North Star from the southern hemisphere.
Right. But the key contribution of Zen to teism is the idea that there is no distinction between the small and the great. The mundane is sacred.
This is why the tea ceremony can be so incredibly serious about such small, seemingly insignificant things.
Exactly. In the Zen monastery, the text notes, there was no hierarchy of labor. The abbot and the novice worked side by side in the fields. Weighing a philosophical discussion about the nature of the cosmos was just as important as weeding the garden or serving tea to your brothers.
If you can't find enlightenment in sweeping the floor, you're not going to find it in the prayer hall either.
Precisely. It is about bringing total presence and concentration to the smallest act. That act is your enlightenment.
There's a great dialogue mentioned, the Soshi dialogue about the fish. I feel like this captures the Zen spirit perfectly.
It's a classic. So Soshi and a friend are walking by a river, so she looks down into the water and says, "Look how the fishes are enjoying themselves. They are so happy."
And the friend, being a very logical, rigid thinker, says, "You are not a fish. How do you know the fishes are happy?"
It's a valid logical objection, right? You can't read a fish's mind. But Soshi snaps back immediately. He says, "You are not me. How do you know that I do not know that the fishes are happy?"
Which is just a brilliant mic drop moment.
It is. It's a defense of intuition over rigid logic. It's a defense of the poetic, empathetic connection to the world. Soshi is asserting that through this great transition, this Tao, he can feel the happiness of the fish. He doesn't need a peer-reviewed study on fish neurology to know it.
So we have the Taoist appreciation of the vacuum and the Zen consecration of the mundane. These two philosophies come together to build a physical structure, the sanctuary, the tea room.
To Sukiya.
Okakura translates Sukiya in 3 ways, and each one tells us something important about the architecture. The abode of fancy, the abode of vacancy, and the abode of the unsymmetrical.
Let's just visualize this for the listener for a second, because when we say sanctuary or temple, Western listeners might be picturing a grand cathedral. Stone, stained glass, soaring arches designed to last for millennia.
This is the absolute opposite of that. This is a hut.
It is the architecture of the ephemeral. It's built of the most frail materials: wood, bamboo, straw, paper. It suggests a kind of refined poverty.
What's the idea behind that? Why build something so fragile?
The idea is that the body is just a hut in the wilderness, a temporary shelter for the spirit. So the tea room reflects this fugitiveness. It is not meant to last forever. It bows to nature and time.
So if a cathedral is built to defy time, the tea room is built to submit to it.
That's beautifully put, yes.
And the entry process is an experience in itself. You don't just walk in the front door.
No. First, you must traverse the roji, the guarding path. This acts as a psychological airlock. Its whole purpose is to break the connection with the outside world.
So as you walk the path,
you are supposed to leave your business deals, your family drama, and your ego behind. You are metaphorically washing away the dust of the city before you enter the sacred space.
And then you reach the door, the Nijiriguchi.
The creeping in entrance. It is a tiny square door, only about 3 feet high.
3 feet. That's tiny. You have to crawl.
Everyone has to crawl. Whether you are a peasant or the mightiest samurai warlord in all of Japan, you have to bow low and crawl in on your hands and knees.
It's a forced physical act of humility.
It is. And practically speaking, if you were a samurai, you had to take your longswords out of your belt and leave them on the rack outside. You cannot bring weapons into the tea room. Inside that space, there is no rank. There is no violence. There is only tea.
So once you've crawled inside, the decor is very specific. And this goes back to the worship of the unsymmetrical.
This is a direct application of the vacuum theory. Western design loves symmetry. We put a candlestick on the left, so we put a matching candlestick on the right. We want balance through repetition.
Teism hates repetition.
Despises it. Okakura says if you have a round kettle, you must use an angular water pitcher. The contrast creates life.
And if you have a living flower in the alcove.
You do not hang a painting of flowers. That would be redundant. It would be an insult to the imagination of your guest and to the real flower itself.
He critiques Western interiors here again, pretty harshly. He calls our rooms museums.
He says we have a useless reiteration. He gives the example of talking to a man while his own portrait stares at you from the wall behind him. To the teist, this is just noise. It creates a visual cacophony that drowns out the spirit.
The idea is that true beauty is discovered by the one who mentally completes the incomplete.
You have to participate. If you have one painting on the wall, you actually see it, you engage with it. If you have 50 paintings, you just see expensive wallpaper.
And cleanliness.
Yeah.
We have to stress the cleanliness. The tea room is spotless, but it's not a sterile hospital kind of cleanliness.
No, it's a natural cleanliness. There is a wonderful story about Rikyu, the great tea master, and his son. Rikyu told his son to clean the garden path, the roji.
The son goes out, sweeps the path meticulously, comes back.
Rikyu checks it and says, not clean enough. The son goes back out. This time he scrubs the stones. He picks up every single twig. He washes the moss with buckets of water. It is absolutely pristine. He comes back and says, Father, there is nothing left to clean. It is perfect.
And Rikyu just shakes his head.
Rikyu steps into the garden, walks over to a maple tree, and gently shakes a branch. A few gold and crimson leaves scatter across the perfectly swept path.
And that's the final touch.
That, he says, is cleanliness. It's not just bareness. It is the art of the random within the order. The leaves on the moss were the final touch that made the vacuum come alive.
That leads us perfectly into the next section, art appreciation. Because for the teist, appreciating art isn't just looking at something pretty, it's a deep relationship.
He uses the parable of the harp of Lungmen to explain this.
I love this story. So there's this ancient kiri tree that grew in a ravine. It was a magical tree. A wizard came along and made it into this incredible harp. But the problem was no one could play it.
Every famous musician in the entire empire tried. They plucked the strings, but the harp just produced these harsh, discordant notes. It was silent. The harp refused to recognize a master.
Until Peiwo came along. Peiwo, the prince of harpists.
And Peiwo did something completely different. He didn't try to force his own song onto the harp. He didn't try to show off his technical skill or play the latest hits.
What did he do?
He caressed the harp. He listened to it. He communed with it. And he let the harp choose the theme.
He sang of nature. He sang of the mountains and the waters that the tree had known when it was alive.
And the harp responded. The memories of the tree awoke. The text says the harp recalled the shadows of the shaking leaves and the roar of the dragon and the waterfall nearby. It sang its own song through Peiwo.
The emperor was just amazed. He asked Peiwo, why did you succeed when all the others failed?
And Peiwo's answer is the whole point. He said, others failed because they sang but of themselves. I left the harp to choose its theme and knew not truly whether the harp had been Peiwo or Peiwo were the harp.
That is profound. It implies that true art appreciation requires a complete suppression of the ego.
The masterpiece is a symphony played upon the beholder's finest feelings. Okakura argues that we must approach a great painting as we would approach a great prince. We must wait for it to speak to us.
And if we go in with our own noise, our own ego, saying, I like this, I hate that, this looks like a Picasso, we'll never hear it.
You'll hear nothing but the echo of your own thoughts. He laments that in modern times, again, this is 1906, but it feels so much like today, we criticize with our ears, not our eyes.
We care about the reputation. Oh, that's a Van Gogh, it must be good. That sold for $10 million, it must be great art.
We're confusing art with archaeology or, stock market valuation. We aren't letting the art vibrate within our own vacuum. We're filling the space before we even get there.
Now, inside the tea room, one of the central elements of art is flowers. But the way the East treats flowers, according to the text, is radically different from the West. And this part is a bit gruesome if you're a plant lover.
It is, yeah. He contrasts Western waste with Eastern sacrifice.
He describes Western banquet tables just filled with cut flowers, hundreds of them. And he points out, correctly, that the next day they are all wilted and thrown on the dung heap.
He sees that as a massacre. He calls it a holocaust of flowers. To the teist, flowers are living beings with their own stories.
In the East, the flower masters believe that cutting a flower is a heavy responsibility. It's a sacrifice. You are taking a life to create a moment of beauty, so you must honor it profoundly.
So you don't cut 100 flowers to make a garish centerpiece. You cut one.
He identifies different schools of flower arranging, too. The formalistic school, which he calls the man of the scissors.
Right. These are the people who torture plants into unnatural shapes using wires and supports and even burning them. He compares them to osteopaths contorting a patient.
But then there's the naturalesque school, which respects the flower's nature. And the tea master's way is the most minimal, the most respectful of all.
Noisy flowers are banned. The flower in the tea room must tell a simple, profound story. And this all culminates in the legend of the morning glory. This is one of the most famous stories in the history of tea.
Okay, set the scene for us.
So, Rikyu, our guy Rikyu again, had a garden of morning glories that was famous throughout all of Japan. The Taiko, the despot, Hideyoshi was the most powerful man in the country, and he heard about this garden and wanted to see it. So Rikyu invited him for morning tea.
The Taiko arrives, expecting this sea of flowers. He wants to be overwhelmed by color and abundance. That's his style.
But when he walks into the garden, there's nothing. The ground has been leveled. It's covered with clean sand and pebbles. Not a single flower, not a single vine in sight. Rikyu had destroyed the entire garden.
The Taiko must have been absolutely furious. He probably thought Rikyu was mocking him, showing him contempt.
Oh, he was fuming. He storms into the tea room, probably ready to order Rikyu's execution right there. And there, in the tokonoma, the little alcove in a simple, beautiful bronze vase, is a single morning glory.
The single best one.
The queen of the whole garden, the single most perfect blossom, preserved to represent the life and beauty of all the others that were sacrificed.
And in that moment, the Taiko understood.
Rikyu sacrificed the abundance to highlight the essence. He demonstrated that one perfect flower is infinitely more powerful than 1,000 average ones. That is the heart of teism, concentration, the vacuum, the worship of the imperfect, made perfect in a single moment.
This brings us to the final and most somber part of the text, the tea masters themselves and the art of death. Because this philosophy isn't just about decor or aesthetics, it's about how you leave the world.
The great tea masters didn't just arrange flowers and whisk tea, they strove to be art. Their lives were their masterpieces, and they revolutionized everything around them: architecture, pottery, textiles, even food.
And we have to return to Rikyu for the final scene, the last tea of Rikyu.
It is a historical event. We've mentioned the tension between Rikyu and the warlord Hideyoshi. Eventually, the warlord had enough of the tea master's independence and quiet defiance. He ordered Rikyu to commit ritual suicide.
So how does a tea master face a death sentence? He doesn't run, he doesn't fight, he doesn't beg.
He holds a tea ceremony. He invites his chief disciples for one last gathering. The atmosphere is described so beautifully in the text, the singing kettle on the brazier sounding like a distant cataract, a cicada outside pouring forth his woes to the departing summer.
He serves them all tea.
He serves them each a cup, one by one. He drinks the last one himself, and then, and this is the shocking part, he takes the bowl, his favorite bowl, and he shatters it on the floor.
He breaks the tea bowl. After all his talk of appreciating objects.
He smashes it. He says, "Never again shall this cup, polluted by the lips of misfortune, be used by man."
That is such a dramatic, almost violent gesture for a philosophy of quietness.
It is the final punctuation mark. It is the closing of the circle. He dismisses the guests. He asks them to leave so he can perform the deed. Only his closest disciple stays behind as a witness. And Rikyu removes his outer tea gown.
And reveals.
He reveals the immaculate white death robe underneath. He had been wearing it the whole time. He was prepared.
He then addresses the dagger.
He holds it up and calls it a sword of eternity. He writes a final death poem about clearing the way through Buddha and Dharma. And the account says he died with a calm smile on his face.
It reinforces that teism is not a hobby. It's not just a pleasant way to spend an afternoon. It is a preparation for the ultimate reality. It is the art of life, which must, by necessity, include the art of death.
It shows that if you live with the right moral geometry, if you understand the vacuum, if you respect the mundane, then even death is just another step in the ceremony. It's just the final sip of tea.
So what does all of this mean? Why are we talking about a book from 1906 and, well, today? Why does it still hit so hard?
Because it challenges the very definition of civilization that we've inherited. It asks us if we are civilized because we have faster internet and better AI, or if civilization is actually about the refinement of the soul.
It asks if you can find beauty in the imperfect. Can you sit quietly with a bowl of tea and feel the universe? Or do you need constant stimulation?
It's a powerful corrective to materialism. It's a corrective to speed.
And its influence is everywhere, even if people don't recognize it. Minimalism, modern design, the whole Apple aesthetic, so much of that less is more DNA comes directly from the tea room.
Absolutely. Okakura taught the world, or at least a part of it, that the vacuum is where the real value lies. And that lesson is more urgent now than ever.
It's a heavy, beautiful, and slightly intimidating philosophy.
All great religions are.
Now, before we sign off, it is time for our thought experiments segment. This is where we take the concepts we've discussed, the vacuum, the Rikyu sacrifice, and we try to apply them to our modern, chaotic world.
And our usual disclaimer, these are for entertainment and educational purposes only. Please do not destroy your gardens or shatter your favorite coffee mugs based on what we say next.
Okay, experiment number 1, the corporate Tsukiya protocol.
I like the sound of that. How do we apply the abode of vacancy to the modern office or the modern digital workspace?
So we take the concept of the Roji, the airlock garden path, and the Nijiriguchi, the tiny crawling door, and apply it to our information economy. Imagine a law or just a new software paradigm where digital workspaces must be unsymmetrical and vacant.
So no clutter, no notifications, no little red badges telling you how many things you're missing.
Radical silence. But here's the kicker. Information is only delivered when pulled. Just like the guest has to bow and crawl into the tea room, the user has to consciously initiate the request for every single piece of data.
So no push notifications, no emails popping up uninvited, no news feeds that scroll infinitely into the abyss.
Nothing. To get your email, you have to open the app and click Fetch Mail. To get news, you go to a site and it shows you 5 headlines, and that's it for the hour.
That would essentially destroy the ad-based internet economy as we know it. The entire attention economy would just stop.
Completely. And the value of a platform becomes what isn't there. The vacuum becomes the premium product. We stop designing for engagement, which is just a euphemism for addiction, and we start designing for the Japanese concept of negative space, of interval.
Think about the productivity implication of that. If you treat checking your email like a tea ceremony, meaning you only do it when you have mentally prepared yourself and walked the garden path to the inbox, you would probably write much better, more thoughtful emails.
And a Zoom meeting that ends 10 minutes early isn't wasted time. It's a froth of liquid jade. It's a gift of vacuum to all the participants.
It connects right back to the Taoist picture. The usefulness of the email inbox is the empty space, not the 1,000 unread emails. If we enforce this, our dopamine loops might break, but our humanity, our ability to think deeply and without interruption would skyrocket.
We would be treating information with the same respect that Rikyu treated the tea.
Okay, that's a good one. What's number 2?
Experiment number 2, the Rikyu algorithm.
Named after the master who destroyed the garden, I'm already nervous.
As you should be. This is an AI curator. But unlike TikTok or Instagram, which are designed to show you more and more of what you like, the Rikyu algorithm analyzes everything you could see, millions of videos, articles, songs, and it deletes 99.9999% of them from your feed.
A digital massacre of content. A holocaust of videos, to use Okakura's term.
And it presents you with one thing, the single perfect piece of information or art for that specific moment in your life, the one morning glory.
Just one. For the whole day.
Just one. And here's the real teism part.
Yeah.
Once you view it, it deletes the access log. You can never find it or see it again. It is ephemeral, a fleeting moment of beauty, then it's gone.
Wow, that is terrifying and beautiful. It's a philosophical test, really. It tests our psychological need for abundance versus intensity.
Could modern humans handle the one morning glory? Or are we so addicted to the garden of the endless scroll that the single perfect thing would feel like poverty, like we're being deprived?
I think we would go through a painful withdrawal. We are the untamed aesthetes running riot in emancipated emotions that Okakura warned about. We have too much tea, or rather too much stuff.
The REQ algorithm would force us to actually see again. It would force us to criticize with our eyes, not our ears or our likes or our follower counts.
It would make every single interaction with the screen sacred, because you know it's the only one you're getting for a while.
It's a scary thought, but maybe a necessary one. We need a little more vacuum in our lives. A lot more, probably.
Maybe we need to start by just shaking a few leaves onto our perfectly swept paths.
Well, on that note, I think I'm going to go turn off my notifications and maybe just stare at a blank wall for a while.
Go find your own cup of humanity.
Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the wisdom of the East. And maybe, just maybe, try sweeping your garden path a little less perfectly. We'll see you next time.